Welcome back, everyone. So in today's lecture, what I'm going to do is show you how to take your application and decouple it into two separate applications. So we'll have a server-side API type setup for the Express application, and then everything on the client side with our Vue and our AJAX and JavaScript, etc., is going to be inside of the client microservice. So I actually have all of this set up already inside of a GitHub repository here. So if you go to my GitHub /jQuery-ajax-spa, then you'll see all of the source code. And I even have regular setup instructions here, but I also have instructions that we're going to work on today, which are for whoever's coming from the previous setup, where you would be if you had completed the class. So I'm going to click here where it says coming from the original monolithic setup, and here are instructions in a markdown file which don't appear to be rendering correctly, but it's alright, we'll work around it. So it's saying that you should make a backup of your project before following these instructions. That's always good advice. If you know how to use Git, then you can use Git to do that. Otherwise, you can just make a physical copy of the folder. Okay, so let's start from the beginning. I'm going to go ahead and move the instructions off the page here. The first thing we want to do is get inside of our project directory, and we're going to rename the directory. So I'm inside of this AJAX jQuery tutorial. You may have named it something else, but this will be your main directory. If you ls, you can see we have our Express application inside of here. All of our client-side code is inside of the public directory. So we need to turn this whole setup into our server, and then we'll extract all the client-side stuff and move it into its own client directory. So I'm going to cd up a level, and I will move the AJAX jQuery tutorial, and we will rename it server. So the mv command is going to rename the first argument, AJAX jQuery tutorial, to the second argument, which is server. So now that I have that, if I ls, I've got a lot of stuff going on here, but you can see somewhere in here I have server. So now what I want to do is create a new parent directory for my project. So I'll make a directory here and I'll call it to-do app, and then I'll move server into to-do app. So because to-do app already exists, it doesn't rename server to to-do app. The mv command will also move a directory into another directory as long as that directory already exists. So when I hit enter and I cd into to-do app and I run an ls, now I can see that server exists inside of there. Let's go ahead and create a new directory. Let me make this a little bit bigger so you can see it better. And I'll make client will be the name of the directory. Now if we ls, we have both client and server. Alright, so we have some client-side files living inside of the Express application right now, and we want to move those. So I'm going to move from server, and then server has a public directory, and it has a CSS directory inside of there. We're going to move that into client, and then we'll move server/public/JS also into client. So now if I cd into client, I do an ls, I can see that I have CSS and JS. I can go into the CSS, and I have that style sheet. I'll go back up one level, go into JS, see what we have inside there. There's that AJAX.JavaScript file. Okay, great. So I'm going to go back up into client, and I actually have one more folder that I need to move, so I'm going to go back up one more, and I'll move from server/source into client. And so if you did the instructions for the gulp and babel setup, then you'll know that source is the directory where we have our source JavaScript using the ECMAScript 6 or ECMAScript 2015 syntax, and then we also have a script for gulp. It's a task runner that will transpile or convert that ES 2015 syntax into regular JavaScript. So all of that is happening inside of the source directory, and we'll take a look at that in a little bit. Okay, so we still need to pull the view out of the server. So we'll move server/views/index.ejs into client, and I'm going to name it index.html. We're no longer going to use the EJS template engine. Now we're just going to do it with pure HTML. So this one off screen a little bit, but if we cd into client and we ls, we can see that we have index.html here. And if we take a look at index.html with the cat command, which will just print all of the code into the terminal here, we can see that we have a bunch of HTML markup. And it's going off the page, but that's fine. I don't need to see it all. I just want to know that it's there. So if I go over into Sublime, all of this doesn't really exist anymore. So I'm going to go ahead and cd up a level. Oops. I forgot to give cd an argument, so I went all the way back to root. So I had to cd into to-do app. Okay, so now inside of to-do app, I'm going to run subl dot. This will open up all my code inside Sublime. I can close this here. We'll take this. And now we have our client directory and our server directory, and we can kind of see everything that's going on here. Well, inside of the server, we still have some partials here. So we have our header.ejs. We can copy all of this code. So I'll make it a little bit smaller so you can see everything that's inside of here. So now I'm going to cut it with Command X or Control X if you're on PC. We'll go up to index.html, and we're just going to replace this include partials header here with the actual header code. So I'll paste that in, and everything is kind of in order. We'll fix the spacing here in a moment. And then I'll go over here to the footer, and I'll copy all of that or cut it, and then go back up to index.html. And same difference, we're going to replace the include partials footer. So we'll open this up, and basically now we have the footer code, we have the regular index.ejs code up until the nav, and then we have the header code. So now we have a full HTML file that we created from the index.ejs in combination with the header.ejs, which we no longer need, and the footer.ejs, which we no longer need. Okay, so the formatting's a little screwed up now. Let's see if I can fix that real quick. Okay, that should be good. Alright, so I will save it. And we'll open our side menu here. Go back. And if you don't know the command for opening the side menu, toggling it back and forth, it's Command KB or Control KB, I believe, if you're on PC. Okay, so I'm going to open everything back up again, and I know there's some EJS syntax inside of here that I need to get rid of. So right now, I'm going to find this unordered list right here, and we have this loop that there's some birds singing outside my window, which sounds great, but it's not good for the audio, so I'll just wait a second. Okay, sorry about that. So we have our unordered list here, and we're just going to take everything inside of it, starting with the todos.forEach, the start of the loop, all the way down to the closing EJS syntax, and we're going to get rid of all of that. So all we have now is this empty unordered list with the ID of to-do list, and I'll save the file. So if you're following along with the instructions, I'll pull these over real quick. Whenever you get to this step, I actually have the markup here, and you can just copy it down and make sure that everything you've been doing thus far is correct. Okay, so everything looks good except at the top of my HTML here, for some reason I don't have the doc type, so I'm going to put that in there. Okay, so now I can actually go and clean up the views directory, which we no longer need, from the server directory. So I'll go into server and then views, right click, and you can delete the folder here, or you can do it from the terminal. So we'll delete that, and we no longer need this public directory either, so I'll go ahead and delete that. So I'm seeing that the gulp file.js is here. If you're using gulp, then you're going to want to follow these next few steps. If you're not, then you can kind of tune out for a second, and I'll tell you when you can start paying attention again. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my terminal here. I'll clear this up a little bit, and what I want to do is move the gulp file from the server into the client. So now you can see it went from here and it jumped up to there. This file is no longer going to exist on the server. I can close it, don't save, and here's the new one right here. So the gulp file is going to change. It's no longer looking inside of a public directory. It's just going to go to the JavaScript directory to find the source file that it needs to transpile. So I'll change public just to a period, and now we can save this file. And now let's go back to our terminal. We'll cd into the client, and we'll run an npm init, run through this real quick. The entry point, it says gulp file.js. There's actually not going to be an entry point, so it doesn't really matter. You can just run all the way through it. Is this okay? Yes. And now we have this package.json over here inside of the client. Okay, so we need the dependencies for Babel and gulp to work. So we'll do an npm i-S. That's the same as npm install -- save. And then we'll get Babel preset ES 2015. We'll get gulp Babel, and you can't see any of this, so let me make it smaller and full screen. Okay, Babel preset ES 2015, gulp Babel, and I believe gulp connect. Okay, go ahead and let all of that install. All right, great. Now everything's installed. I'm going to move this off to the side, and we can actually go into our package.json for the server, not for the client, and we're going to go ahead and clean up some of the packages that we don't need inside of here. So we don't need EJS because the view is being handled by the client now. We're going to get rid of that. We don't need method override anymore, so we'll get rid of that. And we don't need any of these dev dependencies anymore, so we'll get rid of that all the way up to this comma right here. This is the stuff that we just installed inside of the client package.json. So this is what your file should look like now. I'll go ahead and save it. And now there's some lines inside of our app.js that we can clean up. So let me scroll through here. We are no longer serving any public assets or assets from the public directory, so we can go ahead and get rid of that. We're not dealing with the view engine for EJS anymore, so we can get rid of that. We don't need method override. We can get rid of that. Let's go ahead and put a semicolon here instead of a comma. And then, of course, we can get rid of the app.use method override. All right, so now we can save our file. Okay, so that's enough for this video. In the next video, we'll come back and I will show you how to enable something called CORS. That's cross-origin resource sharing inside of your Express application so that we can access it from the client whenever we have those both running separately. So we'll see you in the next video. Thanks.